Whether you're just starting out or you've been in the game for years, there are some common traps that adventure filmmakers can fall into. Today, I'm gonna break down 5 common mistakes I see adventure filmmakers make, and more importantly, how to avoid them so your next project doesn't end up a complete disaster. Let's dive in. One of the biggest mistakes I see adventure filmmakers make is not planning properly. Poor planning and lack of scouting can really make or break these types of shoots. If you've never been to a specific mountain bike trail or a specific ski resort and you try to shoot there, you may not be getting the most out of the potential of that place if you haven't been there, because some mountain bike trails and some ski resorts have spots that are better than others. Most places do. If you're going to Vail ski resorts, for example, making sure you're hitting the back bowls rather than just the runs on the front can be a make or break on where you might be scoring a powder shot or not. And let me be honest, it's not totally unavoidable to encounter challenges on the day. That's what makes adventure filmmaking so exciting, and what makes this craft something that's worth pursuing is because every day out there is different. One day may be sunny, one day may be snowing, and you're in the exact same place capturing the same person, and the experience and the vibe on camera is totally, completely different. And that's one of the things I love about it, but if you're not putting in the time to plan and scout properly, you could be missing out on the potential. So in terms of some actionable tools that I use in order to kind of elevate my planning and my scouting is Google Earth and Sunseeker. Google Earth is actually an incredible tool I use all the time because you can now have 3D models of most places on Earth. This will allow me to understand, even if I'm not able to go beforehand, which ridgeline would be the best based on the mountain views in the background, or which spot of the beach might have the best waves. There's a lot of scouting potential that can happen just on Google Earth from the comfort of your living room. The second app I use all the time is called Sunseeker. Sunseeker is an app that shows you where the sun will be at certain times of the day, and it uses augmented reality to do that. Basically, you point your phone at a certain area and it will showcase the arc of the sun from where you're standing. This is a really helpful tool, especially in skiing and snowboarding shoots when you're trying to have a backlit subject, because snow, when it's backlit, looks the best. And if you know where the sun is gonna be at certain times, you can plan around getting those backlit shots all day long if you'd like. And in terms of scouting, this can get you a long way, but I think the most important part is having a contingency plan if things don't go the way you've planned. There are ski and snowboard shoots that I have done where I will show up on the day hoping to capture amazing powder footage or amazing shots of the athlete in the snow as the snow falls, but it's beautifully sunny and that shot's just not gonna happen. So having a backup plan in place where you're like, hey, we made a trip to the ski resort, everything's in place, the crew's here, the athletes are here, we're ready to go, we're ready to create something. Whether it's snowing like we'd planned on, or if it's sunny, we're ready to make something magical. This is the part of the planning process that is important also when it comes to communicating your vision with brands. If you have a mood board totally around powder shots in the snow and you're unable to get that, the brand will be really disappointed. If you're able to communicate some lifestyle shots or some product shots that can happen whether or not the weather cooperated with you, they can still be happy with the product that you've delivered because you have done the planning beforehand to communicate your vision up front. So now that you've avoided that mistake and you've scouted your location, or you've looked at it on Google Earth, you've checked out Sunseeker, if you've already been to the area, you know where the light's gonna be, now is time to prep the gear. And a big mistake I see in especially beginner filmmakers is not testing your gear beforehand. Gear mishaps are a huge part of adventure filmmaking. We are putting cameras through the ringer. A lot of higher end technology should not go into the environments that we're bringing them in. It's a lot to ask a camera company to make something that is fully waterproof, weather sealed, amazing, beautiful footage all the time in negative 30-degree temperatures. It's just not realistic to have technology in a lot of these harsh, rugged, remote environments. If you're able to test your gear beforehand, you can go in with the confidence knowing that from the beginning, your gear can hopefully withstand some of the environments that you're putting it through. When I go on shoots in the mountains for extended periods of time, I learned this the hard way, but cold batteries can die. And so to help prevent my batteries from dying, especially when we're camping for multiple days on end, I will actually put my batteries in my sleeping bag and keep them warm with my body heat overnight. This may seem kind of dramatic, but it does make the difference of being able to shoot and continue making the documentary or the adventure film that you're making the next day. If you show up and you have a great first day of footage and you have 4 more days of being in the backcountry in the cold and all your batteries are dead and you didn't have a backup option, you didn't properly prepare your gear and you didn't put measures in place in order to continue on shooting if something goes wrong, which is why I always make sure all of my gear is prepared and ready before I take off. This even goes as far as hitting the record button on my camera before I put it in the bag to make sure the battery's in there and fully charged, to make sure there's no problems with the memory cards, the microphone's working. Everything should be functioning in a nice studio environment like this before you take it out into those rugged environments. If you forget an SD card or a microphone or a battery, that can be a total disaster for your shoot. In order to avoid making this mistake in the future, I would recommend packing light, but packing smart. Carry gear that can serve multiple functions. My ND filter can fit on all of my cameras because I have step-up rings that allow all of my focal lengths to be the same. So I use one 82mm ND filter on all of my lenses regardless of what lens filter thread it is. This is just a small thing, but then I can carry two ND filters with me in case one gets dropped in the snow or falls off the side of a mountain or broken if the camera gets hit. I know I can still continue to shoot properly if we're in a remote environment and something goes wrong. I like to take two camera bodies for the same reason, both that have photo and video capabilities in case the main video camera decides to stop working. The backup video camera still works and can still capture footage that's adequate enough to continue working on the shoot. The same thing with photos. If I use one photo camera and it stops working, my backup is the Sony a7S III for photos, and it can continue delivering pretty amazing photos as well. So prepare that gear, pack light, pack smart. The third mistake I see is ignoring storytelling. This one is near and dear to my heart because I feel like first I am a documentary filmmaker and I do that through outdoor adventure sports. But in approaching outdoor adventure sports this way, I've seen a lot of different brands and athletes resonate with this sort of storytelling style because they feel that they can communicate their message to a broader audience. Everyone loves a good tread-it. Don't get me wrong, people love to see people skiing hard, mountain biking hard, surfing big waves, and having a blast in the outdoors. But I also think in order to communicate your depth and emotions as a filmmaker, you can take your career a lot farther if you start to implement storytelling techniques. It's really easy to get caught up in creating beautiful visuals, especially when you're first starting out. Being in these amazingly beautiful places, you will get caught up in creating the best visual image possible. But after a while, that can really start to fall flat if you're not accompanying it with some story. When I'm touring my films at film festivals or having discussions with distribution companies about where the films can go next, that is only because I embraced the techniques of storytelling in my films and didn't just make a beautiful Instagram reel that had the best visuals possible. I think you can take your career a lot farther by embracing the storytelling. And don't get me wrong, storytelling is hard. I can totally resonate with that. This month has been absolutely crazy when it comes to the amount of projects that I've been doing, the amount of editing that I've been doing. It's way easier to just take the footage, assemble it into a quick edit, and then send it off. But storytelling is the work that goes into it, but it's also the work that you can get out of it. And storytelling takes much more time, is much more creatively fulfilling and draining, but at the end of the day, hopefully you can have a project that you're really proud of, because if you put in a story and you said something to the world, people might resonate with that. They might be inspired to go get on a bike for themselves or lace up their running shoes again for the first time in decades. You never know the impact that your films can have, and by embracing storytelling techniques, you can go much farther in your career. And some actionable tips on how you can avoid ignoring storytelling. Before you shoot, outline the story you want to tell. This is a really basic process, and I will sometimes just do it in a journal or do it on my laptop, and I'll write out maybe a description of what it is that I want to film. So I want to create a film about a group of female athletes who are signed up for this all-woman cycling event, and they want to talk about inclusivity in the cycling world. Maybe this isn't the best story in the world, but it's something small that I can start with locally that then can build my portfolio and get me to the next level. Over time, the more you do, the stronger your skills will get. The more capable you'll feel in storytelling, the better you'll be at conducting interviews, the more you'll be able to capture natural sound moments of people talking about what they love or how that can be included into the edit as well. There's so much depth when it comes to storytelling, and feel free to check out some of the other videos on this channel because it will walk you through a lot of storytelling tips in the outdoor adventure industry. But ultimately, what it comes down to is what do you have to say and how do you say it? And that is the process to begin telling a good story. But even if you've done all of these things and you've, planned your story out well, you've prepared your gear properly, you've scouted the location, a huge mistake I still see filmmakers make is overlooking safety. As adventure filmmakers, it's not uncommon to be pushed into dangerous environments. Over the years of doing this, I've also been caught in a lot of dangerous situations. And sometimes those end up being great stories in the end because they work out, but sometimes they don't. Avalanches can happen. Accidents, rock climbing can happen. You can overlook tying a knot in the end of the rope and you rappel off the end. You can get caught in a dangerous rip current and you can drown. There are so many situations that can happen in the outdoors if you don't prepare properly that can really be devastating to the shoot. And I'm not just talking about losing footage, I'm talking about losing something a little bit more. And I think when it comes to adventure filmmaking, it's really fun to talk about the storytelling components and how we can get the best shots, but I think at the core of what we do, safety is the most important thing. In these sorts of situations, the biggest way to avoid making this mistake is just making sure you're taking the time and energy to properly assess the risks and decide what is worth it and what is not worth it. There's a bigger conversation about risk and how to properly assess it, but when you're in these extreme environments, there is inherent risk that takes place with these activities. Just like there's inherent risks in everyday life. When I go snowboarding, there's a potential I can fall and hurt myself. But I can assess that risk and understand that I've been snowboarding for 2 decades. It feels as second nature as walking sometimes for me, and I know that if I'm going down this type of run at this type of speed with a camera, there is very, very little chance that I will fall. So I take on that risk because I know it's within my abilities to properly avoid it and go forward safely. However, I would not go on a absolutely insane skydiving adventure or base jumping adventure because I've never been skydiving and I've never been base jumping. So it would be kind of irresponsible for me to go film a base jumper as I base jump myself because I'm not experienced in that way, and that would be irresponsible when it comes to risk management. So for your next shoot, I highly encourage you to consider the terrain, consider the conditions, consider the weather, what it is that you're going into, and properly assess the risk. Because no matter how cool the footage might look, it's not worth harming yourself or those a part of the shoot in order to get it. And once you and your crew and your athletes are home safely, this is where I see mistake number 5 pop up, and that's neglecting post-production, both in the planning and in the execution. What I mean by that is editing can take a long time. Editing is a really important part of making these videos. In terms of time, it is significantly more time to edit a video than it is to shoot a video. This might not be the case if you've planned the video really well and you're shooting a commercial style video, but for documentaries, it is absolutely the case. This isn't even just about the time it takes, it's also about the backup workflow to make sure that your footage is safe and secure in case of accidents. Like I've mentioned in this video and tons of other videos, we're going into extreme environments, and losing an SD card by dropping it in the snow can be detrimental to your shoot. So making sure you're having a backup workflow that is safe and all your footage gets onto your hard drives properly can really help mitigate these concerns and avoid you making these mistakes on your next shoot. Editing is a huge part of my life, and although I would love to say it's not, I actually really enjoy editing because I think editing is where the story gets told. We can go out and capture amazing footage and get beautiful visuals, but for me, I feel like my style and my voice and my emotions as a person, not just a filmmaker, but a person, come through in the stories that I share in the editing style that I have. If you neglect this process, you're missing out on a potential for sharing meaningful stories into the world, sure, but you're also missing out on sharing you to the world. What do you care about? What do you love? And even if you don't want to be the one directing and filming and editing everything yourself and you want to hire an editor, I still think proper planning when it comes to pre-production is really important. When you're out on your shoot for multiple days at a time, at the end of every day, back up your footage, make sure it's secure in at least 2 locations, have files labeled, things organized, maybe even import it into Premiere so you can start to assemble daily selects. So when it gets into the editor's hands, you can turn this around quickly so you, your client, and your athletes are happy. You can also avoid this mistake by planning out a post-production schedule and sticking to it. This has become increasingly more important in my life as I've become more busy and I'm juggling multiple projects. There has to be a number of revisions on how many times you can go over a specific edit in order to make the brand or the athlete happy. Although I would love to devote endless amounts of time and energy to certain projects, it's just not realistic to go through 5 or 10 rounds of edits in order to get it to where exactly it needs to be. Part of the filmmaking journey is knowing that you got hired for your style and you got hired for your capabilities as a filmmaker, and if you deliver a project to the client that isn't up to their standards, making sure they have some rounds of revision to get it to where they need to be, but also having them understand that they hired you for a reason, and if they're not getting what they wanted in return, that's also partially on them for hiring you for a style that maybe you wouldn't have been fit for. But still, revisions are a part of the process. Never expect your first cut to be the final cut. And when it comes to avoiding all of these post-production mistakes, that's where I'll leave you, because I think most important is that you are creating a video that is the best that you can make it, but also it's the best that it can be for the person that's paying for the video. If you're interested in learning more about my specific backup flow, feel free to drop a comment below. I'd be happy to make a video about it. But for now, let's recap. The 5 mistakes I see adventure filmmakers make are poor planning and scouting, inadequate gear preparation, ignoring storytelling, overlooking safety, and neglecting the importance of post-production. By avoiding these mistakes, you will craft a better, more compelling adventure film. But also remember that everyone makes mistakes. I am still making mistakes in my career. That is part of growth, and that is part of learning as a filmmaker. And although I am here in a studio with printed out photos from my past adventures, and I'm going on an expedition here in a couple weeks, I'm still continuing to learn how to be better and how to make better films, better YouTube videos for you all to engage with, and better stories that people can get inspired to go out and adventure for themselves. If you want to see some of my adventure films, feel free to peruse this YouTube channel or check out my website in the link in the description. There are lots of fun stories there for you to enjoy. Thank you so much for watching. I love you. I'm proud of you for learning something new today. Have the best day ever.